first and foremost, the new polls that have come out and some of the concerns that are mainly coming from Democrats that these polls may be a bit misleading. I'm sure they're having flashbacks, as I said, of 2016. We have John Fetterman saying polling has been seriously damaged since 2016. And that's one of the truths, is that Trump is going to be tough in Pennsylvania, and that's absolutely the truth. We also are seeing reports that what they're quote-unquote calling the Sun Belt today, which is some of the big swing states, you have Trump leading in those, while you have a national poll that has Harris taking a pretty significant lead.
And I think where some of this concern from Democrats comes is that in the last two elections, both 2016 and 2020, the polls underpolled President Trump. Regardless of the outcome of the election, he fared better on election day than the polls had him doing. And what you're seeing now is when you look at these razor-thin margins in place like Pennsylvania, where they have Vice President Harris only up 0.7, but with the last four polls that have come out, Trump is up 1, there's a tie, Trump is up 2, and there's another tie. So when you start to look at this landscape and you think about Hillary Clinton being up 8% in the polls in Pennsylvania ahead of Election Day, and then Harris being up only 0.7, it's starting to give Democrats real concern that there's a false sense of security that, she got through the convention, she got through the debate, and we've seen her polls elevate, when in reality, they're concerned that President Trump will do as he's done in the previous two election cycles and outperform the polling numbers. Yep. And when it's a razor-thin margin, that leads to potentially a landslide for President Trump.
Yeah, we live in a weird world where I think the polling system is probably completely broken. Will sent me a pretty interesting article over the weekend about how some new firms are starting to implement AI technology into their polls and how they predicted some elections within a few hundred votes using AI. I think that's what's going to come out of this. It's sort of like the debates. They needed a bit of a restructuring. The old way just simply is not going to cut it. And I think you got to be smart about this and go into this election knowing that it's going to be a nail biter. It is going to be razor thin, however you want to cut it, because razor thin, as we said, if it's just 1 or 2 or 3%, maybe a 5% victory for either side would be probably considered a blowout. And I feel like it's been that way really since George W. Bush, like since the second George W. Bush election, is once you start winning by a handful of percent is when it's considered a blowout. Maybe you could say that for Obama as well, where it just ends very abruptly, very quickly. And still, those were within, you're still talking about 45 to 55% of the country voting the other way.
And there are senators, and this is, The Hill has even reported that there are senators that are very concerned on the Democrat side that people within their party are going to become complacent or think that the polls are showing a resounding victory for Kamala Harris. Their concern is going to be very similar to 2016 and in to some degrees 2020, where President Trump was undercounted by the pollsters. The support for him was undercounted, not by on purpose, but just a flaw in the model and the polling as in this day we're in today.
Yeah, with President Trump also, I think that they know that a lot of people are not going to be as open with a pollster because they don't know who's on the other phone or the phone line. They don't know what they're actually doing. I've been asked many times, and I honestly don't trust where my data is going.
Right.
So I largely ignore it. But yeah, we should hear from John Fetterman.
That's right. So this is something that Senator Fetterman was saying about even his home state of Pennsylvania, one that is one of the deciding states of this election. Let's play Bite 14.
And I also want people to understand, and it's not science, but there's energy and there's kinds of anger on the ground in Pennsylvania, and people are very committed. And Trump is going to be strong, and that's we have to respect that. Can't even understand it, and it's not like a science that can explain it. But you have to just know that it's real.
You have to know it's real, that you actually have potential for any of these states to go that way. There was even an unnamed or a senator that requested anonymity who said that both Clinton and Biden were doing better in the polls against Trump in 2016 and 2020. That Harris is performing right now.
Right.
So when you have that data in front of you, and we're only 42 days now out, I think early voting has it started?
There are many states where some form of early voting has started, whether it be even in Pennsylvania, people are starting to be able to request mail-in ballots. There's other states. I know North Carolina has some early type of voting that has started, some other states as well. Now, we are only going to see that ramp up the closer we get to this election day of November 5th. So we're already in this election season, as it were. You are seeing the Harris campaign still push for another debate. That's another sign that the people within her party don't think that she's winning by at least by a comfortable margin, maybe even at all. If they had the performance they say they had at the first debate and then are asking for another, normally the person who feels like they're losing is the one that wants another opportunity to put themselves as a contrast to their candidate.
Yeah, of course, she agreed to do a CNN debate and declined the Fox News debate. President Trump said, I'm not debating again. So I really don't think it's going to happen. I think that was one and done. There is a vice presidential debate.
And there's also news that there are talks of them having a final push for votes on prime time on CBS's 60 Minutes, which still pulls a lot of ratings. Like their season kickoff, their first episode of this season had 11 million viewers tune in, which seems shocking that 11 million people are still tuning into 60 Minutes for not necessarily a big headline show. It's not one that was like widely talked about, but now they're talking about an hour-long interview with each candidate aired back to back on CBS in the days leading up to the election. We'll see if that pans out. We know CBS, according to the reporting, is in talks with both campaigns to do this. I think they would not do it if it were just one of the candidates agreeing to it because of equal time and things of that nature right up before an election. Yeah. But we will see if that pans out. That would be an interesting issue that could throw another primetime large viewership event right before an election. Professor Hutchison, what we're now seeing with the concern about polling in swing states, places like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, big labor union states in the Rust Belt, you've been kind of tracking since that polling has come out, as well as the non-endorsement by the Teamsters and their public polling within their own unions showing wide support for President Trump. What are you seeing as far as these private sector unions and what used to be a reliably Democrat vote kind of shifting a little?
Well, essentially, the fundamental question is whether or not blue-collar workers, working-class workers, are better off today than they were 3.5 years ago. That question came up, at least tangentially, in this month's presidential debate. Kamala Harris ducked the question, but blue-collar workers are answering the question. They have seen real wages decline, whereas under Trump, real wages rose by a roughly 15%. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is supporting a fracking ban in Pennsylvania, although she denies it. She supports green energy, and the green energy mandate has adversely affected the automobile industry. Why? Because demand for electric vehicles is declining, leading to layoffs. And then you have the Teamsters non-endorsement of the Democrats, in part because almost 60% of Teamsters workers support Donald Trump. They recognize what many economists have recognized for the last 3 or 4 years. The Biden administration has delivered inflation, the tripling of mortgage rates, the rise in food prices, and so many Americans are worse off. Consequently, blue-collar workers are shifting away from the Democrats, and the Democrats should not be surprised. Their policies are indeed working to their disadvantage.
Artificial intelligence is going to be starting to be used in polling and how it's already done. And in some instances, it's gotten within a few hundred votes. That's be able to take the data, taking what people are talking about on social media in certain areas. They're able to really, in matter of moments, I think they said like under a minute, create this new kind of polling data. I think by the time we get to the next general election, so, in 4 more years, that is going to be your primary source. That's how they're going to break things down. And then we'll really know on a national level if that kind of new polling can be accurate. I think that there's probably more likely than not that it is going to be more accurate just based on the way that data can be mined in real time.